I'm Joseph Wolf, CEO of EFG Wealth Management Israel.
And I am Michael Dadoun, Head of Private Banking at EFG Wealth Management Israel.
And this is Market Makers IL, a financial podcast where we bring you conversations about shekels and stories about success in the Israeli market.
But let's be clear, this is not investment advice, and the conversations with our guests should not be taken as advice either.
So Brachie, we first met you at your last job, and I think one of the reasons we connected right away is because as a former stock analyst, I was very curious about the IR role at VC funds who have different company and investor profiles than what I was used to from the public markets. As I recall, your storytelling approach rang true to me from our first conversation. Can we start with your overall approach to what's broadly called IR, but which in my experience is much more an art than a science?
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Investor relations is definitely an art over a science. I think the important thing in investor relations is empathy. When you invest in a fund, very often you're investing in an idea. You're excited about a specific space, you're excited about a specific focus, but you don't know how the portfolio is going to shape up. And what you're expecting from the IR team is to help you along the journey of your investment in the fund to understand where the fund's going, where the priorities are, what were the decisions that were made, why did we invest in this company, why did we exit this company. So it's almost like an important role that you're able to guide the investor through the process of the life of the fund to understand where the fund's going, its trajectory, its decisions. But also many times investors come into funds because they want to learn about a certain space. They want to get smarter. So the idea of empathy is to say, why did this investor choose us, right? They have so many options. I say that with an airline. You can choose any airline, right? They chose us because they believe that we have a great strategy. And they believe that the space is interesting. So how can I make sure that I understand what motivates them? I understand why they got excited. And then along the way, I can make sure that they leave smarter, more educated. So for me, empathy is I try to put myself in the shoes of the investor in front of me. And I try to understand how can I help this investor along the investment journey to understand how we're creating value, what the value creation journey looks like for them, what the space is looking like, how it's evolving, transparency. I always say that, a lot of times fund managers walk in and talk about everything that's going well. And I know that the investor across from me is only thinking, well, what's not going well, right? Because not everything's going well. So the ability to also say, here's what's going well, here's what didn't, here's how we're fixing it. Now, that honestly goes across the whole entire value chain, not just for a VC and IR, but also for our portfolio companies. So for me, storytelling is not only the ability to tell the story of the fund, but to be able to tell the story of each company, where they're at and where they're going. And I think investors appreciate that because you're giving them a service, right? You're giving them access, but you're also educating them along the way. And that's been really my big joy in doing IR is getting to really know our investors and getting to really understand what motivates them and what they want to learn more about.
It's funny because I was talking to a friend just this morning about a fund that I will not name, and he actually said to me, the IR was so bad, it's left a bad taste in his mouth even 5 years later. So I think that comment is actually spot on about that relationship, about understanding the psychology of the people who are giving you their hard-earned money.
Yeah. I think once you realize, and I had the opportunity, I would sit through investment committees and I would sit through valuation committees, and I always brought the voice of the investor to the room. And I'd say, okay, we made this decision. How do we go back now and explain what we just did to our investors? What's the story we're telling them? Not in a story of like, how do I fluff it up? But how do I give them the opportunity to understand what happened in this room? And that was my goal in the fund that I was in previously, in the fund that I'm in today. And my goal is how do I create that bridge? I love building bridges, but how do I create that bridge between what we're doing day to day in the fund and what our investors know? And it's about bringing the right information at the right time. It's often also not oversharing. They don't need to know about every bump along the way. If I know that in 3 weeks or in 6 weeks, we're going to have a bigger and better picture, I'll wait. This happened to us with SPV, with a Silicon Valley Bank, SVB. It was like, 72 hours or 5 days of complete chaos. And along the way, it was about and everybody was impacted, right? Portfolio companies, VCs, and everybody wanted to get an update on what's going on at that moment. But I created a process where we delivered the information at the right moment along the way and actually got the ultimate feedback from an investor who said to me that we did the best job communicating throughout that process. It wasn't oversharing, it wasn't undersharing. It was sharing the right information at the right time in the most transparent way I knew how to.
So let's just jump back for a second, and I'll do a little introduction. We're really pleased to have Brachie Sprung here today. She's the head of investor relations and communications at Amiti VC, a venture fund which, in its own words, is fueling the next wave of deep tech innovation. Prior to Amiti, Brachie held a similar role at Amun, a VC fund focused exclusively in the healthcare sector. In addition to these roles in the investment sector, Brachie has political experience as well. For 6 years, she was the international affairs advisor to Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat, who's currently a Likud minister in the government.
Can you walk us through your business origin story, touching on politics and VC work? These two areas are in some way, the national pastime of, many Israelis, as the politician you work for has his own VC fund.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and I don't think I have the most typical background, but I do believe that everything I was able to do leading up till today has really given me incredible tools, and I feel very fortunate. I started with Nir Barkat when he was in his first term as mayor, and it was a fascinating and wonderful time to be in the city of Jerusalem. We really felt like we were rebuilding the city of Jerusalem, and I was standing next to somebody who looked at rebuilding really from a business perspective. So we were working with Harvard Business School professors around competitiveness of Jerusalem. We were working with major global consulting firms around how do we really double down and invest in Jerusalem's largest and best assets, and how do we build Jerusalem in a way that we could be globally competitive. So when I got the opportunity to do that, I got to work in probably one of the most interesting cities in the world, also the most complicated. My job was not only to help build the global presence of the city, but I was also the foreign spokesperson. And I always say, if you can tell Jerusalem's complicated story, you could tell any story. Because it's a complicated story. It's a very global city. It's also a very important city to billions of worshipers and believers around the world. And we always said that in 1 square mile, you had more mosques, synagogues, and churches than anywhere else in the world. And yet the city, and people often kind of don't realize this, but the city really works. It works. I did a story with the Wall Street Journal once where we drove around with a garbage truck through the different neighborhoods. And we showed that actually on a day-to-day, Jerusalem is a super functioning city with all of the dysfunction you put around it. So we had to go out and work with global community around how do we rebuild this city, but not just rebuild it for the sake of rebuilding, rebuild it in areas that we believe Jerusalem was the most competitive. So when we were working with Michael Porter at Harvard Business School, we said, what are Jerusalem's competitive advantages? How do we double down on those? So we built the Formula One, and we started working on this incredible Jerusalem Marathon, which today is still going. And we said arts and culture is another major attraction, and tourism. And we started building out arts and culture centers. So someone had to help raise the money for that because the municipality wasn't just creating that. So I got the opportunity to work with global philanthropists who wanted to double down on the city. And it was a wonderful opportunity. But at the same time, I worked with foreign media who were constantly trying to understand the complexities of Jerusalem and couldn't fully understand what was going on because Jerusalem is so nuanced. And anything that was going on, if you look at that specific point and you don't look at the full picture, you're missing it. And that's kind of, I think, where I understood that empathy of investors, because everybody's a shareholder of Jerusalem. Everybody believes that Jerusalem is something that belongs to them, and it does. Jerusalem is such a global city. And everyone has the opportunity to worship and to visit. And that was kind of where I started understanding that when I'm speaking to a reporter from the New York Times, they're coming with an agenda, and I need to help walk them through what's actually going on. So my goal was always trying to bridge for global philanthropists, how they could leave a mark in the city in areas that matter to them. I would work with global and foreign governments around visits and trips, and then I would work on also how to tell the story of a very complicated city. I worked through the mayor's second term, and we decided to go to national politics. I said, it's my time to transition. And I transitioned into VC. And, when I went into VC, I didn't really have any healthcare, finance, or venture background, but I really understood how you build these bridges. And I think that was an incredible tool for me. So we raised a $1.3 billion fund, and I took part in raising a lot of that money. And I was there for 5 years, and we were investing at the convergence of technology and biology during a global pandemic. So you can understand that health was at really everyone's top priority. So it was around working with our investors to understand how we're investing and what we're doing, and working with with our companies around how do you tell your story of your health tech company during a global pandemic. And also working with the global ecosystem around health and how Israel is positioned. I spent last year in Boston. That was my last year at the Health Fund. And it was an incredible year because I got to also see how Israel is perceived globally. So I've always had that opportunity to be on that track between Israel, the U.S., Europe.
And you were there
Israel.
pre and post October 7th,
So I arrived
if I'm not mistaken.
I arrived July, a couple of months before October 7th. And it was a pretty incredible experience to be so far from my home during really probably the most difficult and historic moment for us and as a nation, and for my family and for our friends. But at the same time, we were able to do so much from there. So we definitely tried to seize the opportunity of support. It was amazing. The global community came together to support Israel. We were sending medical equipment, and we were sending whatever we could. And I transitioned over to the Deep Tech Fund when I moved back to Israel in August, and everyone said, wait, you guys are coming back. I said, of course we're coming back. Our life in the US was wonderful, but our life in Israel is full. It's full because the human spirit here, it's full because the opportunity, it's full because of the type of values and the type of education we want to give our children, but also just this incredible ecosystem with everything, this incredible sense of giving, and incredible sense of giving back to the community. And the Deep Tech Fund that I work in, Amiti, is really at such an incredible inflection point because we get to work with entrepreneurs who are at the forefront of compute and quantum, and really spaces that I believe are going to change the world as we know it today. And for me, that's just such a privilege to work with some of the most promising, dedicated, and resilient entrepreneurs I've ever met.
Is there any advice you wish you had received starting?
Such a good question. I think one of the things we all feel throughout our career, especially when we take big leaps in our career, is we're constantly feeling this self-doubt of, I remember I would be standing next to the mayor, and we would be in this really major event with world leaders or probably some of the richest people in the world. And I'd be like, what, why am I sitting here? And I wish that when I was in that moment, I realized that I could just sit comfortably in my seat and I got this. So I think 80% of the time I got it, but there was that 20% in me all the time with a lot of self-doubt. So I think self-doubt is a really helpful and healthy thing in anyone, right? It creates a really healthy balance of pushing you to always be your best. But there's also something, and I don't know if it's a gender thing, but there's something where you're constantly questioning, am I deserving of this moment? Am I deserving of this opportunity? Am I good enough? So it pushes you to do better, but it also doesn't give you that ability that when you're in it, you could just be in it. And I mentor a lot of young, emerging women and men who are kind of entering into the market. I've had many people who I've managed in my teams and other teams. And I say to them that sit comfortably in your seat. It's a piece of advice I received from a partner I worked with. And he said, sit comfortably in your seat. You got this. And I think that it's a really beautiful thing. And it's almost like a very visual thing to think about. You're in the moment because you worked hard, because you are talented, because you bring your all, and because you're good at what you do. And I think that when people finally know that, it's usually a little bit too late. So I'm trying to practice that. And I bet pretty much anyone I meet has a little bit of that. So the question is how much of it, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. If you're not nervous, you might not care enough.
Exactly. So I think that I cared a little bit too much for too long. And I'm trying to get to that right balance. And I say this more to women entrepreneurs and to women in roles like mine who kind of question and self-doubt. And I'm like, you're really good at what you do. Just keep on going. You got this. Sit comfortably in your seat. And if I could just, I say that I remind myself all the time. And it's a balance. It's definitely a balance.
Sounds like great advice. You touched on this a little bit in the part about going back to the U.S. for a little while, but like me, you've got a U.S. and Israeli component to your background, to your work experience, and just life experience in general. How has this influenced your career, and how do you take the best of both worlds, the good and the bad, and some of the differences between the two cultures that you kind of straddle in your life?
Yeah, it's been an incredible gift for me and a tool in my life, because I've always lived on that, somewhere on that airplane between Israel and somewhere else. And I've always been that bridge. And I think that it's, for me, a wonderful opportunity. And I think it really goes back to the first thing we spoke about, Joseph. I spoke to you about this idea of empathy. Very often people walk into a room and they don't read it. They don't read the room. They don't understand that culturally, this is what's acceptable in this room. Culturally, this is how they do business here. This is not about pushing your agenda on someone else. It's about sitting down with somebody and saying, how do we create a win-win opportunity here? And in the US, very often, and I would see this with Israeli companies or just Israeli business people who would walk into the room and say and just like knock their hand on the table. And it's like, wait, like there are codes and rules in Asia, in Israel, in Europe, like read the room. And I think that that's why it brings me back to my role of IR and my role of empathy and my role of seeing the person across from you. What motivates them? What runs their business? What holiday is it? Was it the Super Bowl yesterday? They probably were up watching it with their family. What did they do for Thanksgiving? Don't bother them right now. It's not a good time. It's Sunday. Meaning understanding that we have to fit into people's culture, not necessarily. And again, you don't need to be them. You have to see them. I think we all deeply want to be seen. And I know that it might like take us into the psychology territory, but at the bottom of each and every one of us, we want to be seen. We want to walk into a room, talk to somebody, and somebody says like, and really understands and cares about what motivates you. I expect that from people, and I want to be the same to others. So I think when you're doing business globally, it's reading the room, it's coming in with empathy, and it's understanding what motivates them. Not because you're trying to convince them, but you know what? Sometimes it's just not a good fit. How great would it be to understand that in minute one and not after 6 months running after the wrong opportunity? And I think that when you're able to create that level of alignment, it's so wonderful because you guys are both in it for the right reasons. And I don't want to force anyone to be an LP in my fund. I want to give somebody the opportunity to be an LP in a fund if they want to be at the ground floor of a deep tech revolution. If you care about quantum, we're the right home for you. If you want to know where technology is going and you want to understand things, if you want to work with entrepreneurs who are living in the future, I'm the right place for you. If that scares you and that makes you super uncomfortable, we're probably not the right home for you. And I think that that's so great, like to be clear about your message and your brand. And I think it ties into message and branding. I think for many companies, they're trying to be something they're not. And I think with brand, some of the best brands the alignment between what they offer you and what they say they do is so tight that the experience you're going to get. And that's how it should be with everything we do. There should be this deep alignment between the experience you're going to get and what we know to offer. Don't tell me you're going to do something that you don't know how to do. I mean, if you can learn how to do it, that's great. But if it's just not in your DNA and it's not what you want to do, don't bother. And I think companies all the time, and I see this, when companies truly understand what makes them unique, I always say different is better than better. Don't try to play the better game. You're never going to win. Play the different game. How am I different? How am I going to deliver on my different promise? How do I know to do it? And when you can reach that moment, and you know who you are and you own it and you sit comfortably in your chair and you know the person across from you, then you could start having a real conversation and start really aligning on what you bring and what they want or where your interests align.
Yeah, I think that's a great, people ask, a lot of us do things that are, using the word commodity is always a commodity, but a lot of people do a lot of the same things. And I think what you're saying is companies, there may be an equally interesting investment opportunity with a company that looks about the same. But what you're saying is the people, the process, the technology, understand how that makes you different and roll with it.
Yeah. I think Israelis are great at that, actually. And I think that once you tell them that and you say, be comfortable with being kind of bringing something different, because I think the Israeli mindset, and I see this with entrepreneurs a lot, there is this feeling of they're willing to take risks. They're willing to jump into really deep waters. You know, when you're investing in technologies that are super disruptive, not like orders, little small incremental change, but orders of magnitude change, then you need to have a mindset of, I'm okay bringing a very different solution. You're going to play the better game when you're one of the 2 top leaders in the world. That's when you could start playing a better game. But all the way up to that, start playing the different game. And I think Israelis excel at that. We're going to bring a little bit of a different solution. We understand what our competitors are doing. Here's how we're doing it a little bit differently. And I think that's the conversation investors should have with companies. I think when you're able to fully understand how you're different and how you're bringing a different solution, then you're talking my language.
Very interesting. Just getting into your job, your role. I mean, you recently started at this new fund. Would you say it's a situation where it's like a different fund but the same job, or different fund and different job?
It's such a good question. You know how when they say you met one entrepreneur, right? No one pitch is the same as the one before. VCs are a very intricate process. There's the fund offering. There's how we do business, like that secret sauce. I always look at the W's, right? What we're doing, why we're doing it, who's doing it, where we're doing it, when's the right time to do it. And there's like so many different components and ingredients that go into how a VC does business. And actually, when you start breaking it down, you realize that very, very rarely are you going to meet one VC that looks exactly like the one before. So good diligence, if I had to give you advice on how to do diligence on a VC, good diligence is really digging deep and understanding what they're doing that's different. And understanding their W's, like, hey, why is now the right time to invest in this space? It's the same thing for media, right? Like I say that media can cover a story. If the Wall Street Journal can cover a specific story today, and in 2 weeks from now, you don't have a story. But if your story right this second, there's something very unique and very specific that's happening right now, now's the time to run with that story. And if you're the actual right person to be doing it. So my job today is very different in many ways than what it was before. I'm able to bring with me a lot of skills and a lot of know-how. In every job you become smarter and you learn from mistakes and you develop and you understand what matters and what matters less. One of the things that really mattered to me was I wanted to be with a team that I wanted to learn. Like I'm a very curious person. And for me, this ability to be sitting with companies who are really taking technology to the limits and really doing things that are so complex that there's only really 2 or 3 teams in the world can do them. And they're also probably the best in their space. We invest mostly in people coming out of academia or people who are coming with super deep expertise in a specific space and who are doing something that really there's only a couple teams out there that we need to assess. So yes, there are a lot of similarities in the job, but I think you guys know this because you guys spend a lot of time with the ecosystem. No investor and no entrepreneur is similar to the one before. That's why I love the different game, right? I love it because I want to understand how you're different. Let's just start there. But the similarities for me it really comes down at the very core to the ability to build real relationships with your portfolio companies. That they're going to know that when things get really rough, because they will get there, that you're the right person to be next to them. The ability to be able to build a very differentiated approach to access and to investments. Because if I can invest in the same companies that anybody off the street can invest in, then we're not doing you a service here. The ability to invest in a space that most people can't understand yet. And the ability to do it in a way that's differentiated. So I think that, for me, yes, I brought a lot of my experience of working with LPs and working with companies to tell their stories. So I'm able to kind of press play on day one, but I still have a lot to learn. And that's exciting for me.
You've spent a lot of time over the last few months, from in speaking with you, I understand, to investors outside of Israel. What's going on right now in terms of perception of Israel, doubling down, any shift that's pronounced, same business as usual, or are we in a new environment for coming to invest in Israel?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question and very timely. I would divide the investors into two groups. I think there are the investors who have done business with Israel in the past and who've seen these shifts, who've seen these up and downs, who've been part of the processes of Israel goes through. Every couple years, we have a crisis we're dealing with. It's just kind of part of the DNA of the type of region we live in. And those investors have seen Israel go into this crisis, but emerge from it. And those investors, I think, have a lot of faith in the resilience and the ability of the Israeli entrepreneur, not to emerge, but to emerge stronger. And those investors are here now. I sat with a bunch of them in Tel Aviv last week, major US financial institution. And I turned to them and I said, wow, like it's pretty incredible that you're here now. They brought together a bunch of VC leaders. And they said to me, absolutely, like we've been doing business with Israel for over 20 years. And we have so much faith in this ecosystem that we don't only believe that it's going to come out strong, it's going to come out stronger. And then I think there's the business community that's either on the fence or hasn't really done business with Israel in the past. And I get it. Like you read the news and they're like, maybe today's not the first day to jump into the water. Maybe we'll wait. Maybe we'll sit on the sidelines. Maybe we'll watch. It's interesting, but actually US VCs had one of their most active years in the Israeli VC ecosystem. I think if you look at investments and deal flow, US VCs have absolutely doubled down on the Israeli ecosystem. And you're seeing that, really across the board, doubling down on the Israeli entrepreneurs. There's also, after every one of these crises, and you could see it really so clearly in the numbers and the graphs, there is this unbelievable, incredible burst of innovation. We saw that in the news yesterday.
Yes.
You see that with this whole new space and deep technology of dual use. People are coming back from the battlefield with just incredible insights. So I think, and with incredible resilience. So I think that the Israeli business, I think what's difficult in the storytelling of it all is you read the news and it's overwhelming. And you read the news and it looks like things in Israel are pretty terrible. But then I was sitting in the streets of Tel Aviv yesterday and I was like, how do I explain what's happening in this coffee shop right now to the world?
And the traffic into Tel Aviv.
How do I explain this to the world?
Yeah.
So I think the global business community who've done Israel with, the global business community who has done business with Israel in the past gets it. And they're like, this is actually the best time to invest in Israel. And that's what they did this past year. And I think what you'll see in the future is those who were on the sidelines will feel more comfortable to jump in. And, I think that that's legitimate. Like they'll come in when they're comfortable. And it's a complicated and difficult story to tell that things in Tel Aviv, the sun is shining and people are walking around, to Israel's in the middle of a regional war.
Which are questions everyone should be asking, but is not in the current VC environment?
I think the question everybody should be asking is, what's the future of VC? I think it's a space that hasn't gone through a lot of disruption, but has so much potential to really become more sophisticated. I think that VC in general has kind of stayed the same, but technology is shifting. The entrepreneurial mindset is shifting. I think the things you could do today, you probably couldn't do 5 years ago. You see it with where ChatGPT has gone. You see it with DeepSeek. So I think investors should be asking themselves which VCs and which partners of mine understand where technology is going. What are they doing with it? Right? I referred before to, if you're not asking yourself what at this moment right now is so unique, What do I know now that I didn't know before? And who is already looking into the future to understand where this is taking us? I think that's a question they should be asking themselves. How are we evolving?
How about the structure, though? Meaning fee structure, and also there is so much activity in private markets and so little activity on the exit side that the path to the end looks different than it did when you started.
Yeah, I think you see waves in markets all the time, right? It was an incredible year for M&A activity, which makes complete sense because the IPO window was shut. So when you're not IPOing, what are your other opportunities? And everybody was talking about SPACs 5 years ago, and I haven't heard that word anywhere. And because we're an early stage, and because I think what we do and the types of way we invest, we go in so early in spaces that I have to say it makes our work very hard because I can't always explain to our LPs what we're doing right now. It's so complex. So the company's, working on dynamical modeling, and I start trying to explain to them how quantum in 3 years is going to shift everything they thought about. It's complicated. So there's definitely the complexity premium that you're buying into. Definitely in VC. Yes, and VC is going to change. I have no doubt. I think what I love about joining Amiti is that we're not married to any specific structure. We just launched a multi-asset SPV because we understood that LPs want to buy into companies that are a little bit more de-risked. They want to buy into companies that they know what the 3 assets are, and they want it to go in a little bit later. So we built a multi-asset SPV. We said we have 3 companies that we have very high conviction around, and we're excited about them. And they're in the high-performance compute space, in the quantum space, and the dynamical modeling space. And we actually think they're super synergistic. And we think that they are some of the most exciting technology companies we know today. So that's what we did for our LPs. And I think that the ability to read the room, understand what LPs are looking for, be flexible, and not try to constantly stick to a specific structure, but understand that, hey, what's that moment right now? And that's what we did at the fund. And that's what I love about the kind of work I get to do is we get to understand what our LPs are looking for and be flexible around that.
Can you define success to you and to a VC in perhaps non-financial terms?
Yeah. So besides outlier returns, because that's the business that we're in.
Yes.
That's the obvious stuff.
It's the obvious, but I have to tell you, it's pretty shocking. You don't see it all the time. LPs put money $1 in because they're expecting to get 3 back at the minimum. I think success is being able to provide access to investors into things that they could not have done on their own, giving them access to things that are cutting edge, that are differentiated, making them smarter on the way, and making them feel like they're part of a journey that's really exciting and that's really different. Because I think that it's the same way I said this about airlines, right? Like, how do we choose to fly United versus Delta? You're getting the same seat, right? It's so nuanced, the difference between each one of these airlines, yet we've all created some type of loyalty to an airline or some type of loyalty to a specific product that we choose, the type of sneakers you buy, the type of button-down shirts you wear. And I think very often you do it because you've been able to get consistency over time. You know what you're going to get. There's deep alignment between what you know they offer and what you get. So you're not going to get surprised by something else. Definitely not for the bad. And through that process, you feel really good about it. I know it sounds really basic, but LPs should feel really, really good about their journey. Investors should feel really good. I mean, you guys have the same thing with your investors. They should feel really good when they reach out to you and how you respond to them and the type of service they get from you.
Definitely.
That is not standard all the time. And I think that our job as service providers, right? We're all really providing a service. I'm providing a service to LPs and to entrepreneurs. You're providing a service to your clients. They should feel really great about the journey. And they should know that every interaction they have with us is on point. That they're going to get the truth. They're going to get it in a timely manner. They're going to get it in an authentic way. It's going to be aligned with what we promised them we would do. And if there's a bump around the road, I'll reach out. When things are going really well, I'll let them know. And when things are exciting, they'll be part of that excitement with us.
Now, what do you expect in 2025? And are there any places you think we will be surprised that others are ignoring maybe?
I'm a really positive person at heart. So, when I came back to Israel after living in Boston this past year, it was really shocking, the heaviness I felt in the air. The heaviness just because we've gone through a really traumatic year and a half here. There is no one who hasn't felt the pain and the trauma of everything around. And yet with all that heaviness, I carry a deep sense of positivity. A, because we don't have any other choice, but B, because I truly believe that 2025 and even over the next couple of years in Israel, we are going to emerge so strong. I see it today. I see it in the eyes. I spend time with injured soldiers. I spend time with entrepreneurs who came back from the battlefield. I see my children who are getting ready to take part in meaningful parts of giving back to the Israeli society. I watch my neighbors' children, and I think what I see in everyone is this deep sense of commitment to building a strong society, a deep sense of commitment to Israel, a deep sense of commitment to making sure we have a better future. So yeah, there are bumps on the road, but 2025 is going to be a great year. It's going to be a great year because we're going to rebuild. We're not going to finish it overnight, but we're all get to be part of a historical moment in this state where we all get to be part of rebuilding Israel. We all get to tell our grandchildren, our children get to tell their children that in 2025, they were part of creating a better society. I say each one of us has to do what we know how to do. If it means showing up to work and making a good investment, if it's making the company you invested in better, if it's investing in places that you believe in, if it's volunteering, if it's being a better neighbor, I think there's this deep sense of common shared goal here. And the entrepreneurs that I meet are so committed to winning despite. So I think if we had resilient entrepreneurs before, we have resilient entrepreneurs on steroids today. Because they feel like the onus of proving that we're going to succeed is on us. There's this very successful entrepreneur who's been very vocal in the US, who I worked closely with this past year as he was doing really wonderful things for Israel. And he's always had this history of betting on spaces that looked like the underdog and ended up really emerging. And I sat with him in his office, and I get very emotional when I talk about it. And we were talking about everything going on. It must have been November. We were sitting in his office in New York, and he looked at me and he said, "Brachie, I know this is a really dark time, but I promise you we're going to emerge stronger." And two things stuck with me there. One, he said, "we." I thought that was so amazing. He doesn't live in Israel. He hasn't visited it in a while. But he feels part of this story. And the second thing is that he knew that even in the darkest moments, we always do. We just finished the holiday of Purim. And I think if you look at Israel's history, the Jewish history, we're about to enter Passover. We have this history of going through really dark times and emerging stronger every time. And it's not going to happen on its own. It always happens because very caring and very committed and very dedicated people understand that it's on them. We understood that on Passover, and we understood that in the holiday of Purim. We understood that the entrepreneurs who got that repeat offer from Google last night for $30 billion understood that. The companies that we invest in understand that. Your clients understand that it's on us. Nobody's going to do it for us.
Well, I think it's optimistic and a very positive way to frame where we are. We've been ending each of our episodes with some rapid fire questions. You up for them?
Oh my God, I didn't prepare.
That's why it's so fun.
Okay.
Worst career advice that you've been given, not that you've provided.
Fake it till you make it.
Who is your personal business icon?
Warren Buffett.
Elaboration or just overall Buffett fan?
It's just he puts his head down and he gets the job done.
Go-to Israeli junk food or restaurant?
Bamba.
There you go. Last time you changed your mind about something, or the last thing you changed your mind about?
Oh my God, I have so many of those every day. Israeli drivers.
They're good or bad?
They're not as bad as we think.
Now, that might be the most optimistic thing I've heard you say.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time on the highway, and Israeli drivers, they get to where they need to get to. Sometimes it's a little bit aggressive, but they get there.
Excellent. Brachie, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
It was great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.